Like to make a comment. I'm somebody I'm a farmer, by the way, and we have the Carl Moyle program, which has been around for years, very successful. I agree with you, but I just want to make a comment first. The valley where Mr. Salas represents is in a basin where if you took every single person out of the county, Kern County, you would still have pollution there because it's transported. So I just want to make that clear, and that's transported from the westerly winds that come from the coast. And we just saw in the comments that the chair made about how much money spent making sure that Bay Area folks drive a Tesla and get in the carpool lane at the expense of trying to figure out how we get really disadvantaged people in ZEVs. And you're right, they're the twofer. If you get them out of the bad car and you get them into a car that is more affordable, it's great, but there's charging systems that need to be available. There's those things. But I want to get to my main point. My main point is, I asked it earlier, was as the auditor's report noted, all the state's ZEV goals have been established by executive order. The first order was with Governor Brown, 1.5 million zero-emission vehicles by 2025 and 5 million by 2030. Governor Newsom's executive order directs the ARB to achieve 100% zero-emission vehicles by 2035. Senator Laird corrected me. AB 32 was passed in 2006. 14 years. 15 years. Well, it's 14 years till 2035. First of all, the first question is, what statutory authority will you be relying on to adopt regulations to ban the sales of internal combustion engines by 2035 as directed in Governor Newsom's executive order? That's the first question.
Yeah, let me go right at that. What we will be doing is building on the ZEV regulation. So the ZEV regulation is a manufacturer requirement for production. It's not a ban of the use and operation of an in-use IC engine. But to your question on authority, AB 32, state law, Federal Clean Air Act, we can't get to the health-based air quality standards that you touched on in the Valley without transitioning to cleaner transportation. So those laws that focus on ozone, PM 2.5, toxics, and GHGs all have a bearing on supporting a transition to clean transportation. Those are the work that we're doing, both through regulations and incentives, because as you all have noted, we need far more clean trucks and cars than we have today.
Okay, now I want to make another comment, which you heard earlier. You weren't on, I guess, but you heard earlier. So I represent the 1st Senate District, which is Tahoe, the Oregon border, all the way down to Sacramento, which is mostly forested in our watersheds, which has been spewing out carbon. We had 4.2 million acres last year burned in California, and many millions the years past. Since 2012, we've had biggest fires in the state's history, and more devastation in homes and impacted in deaths, which we don't even count in our carbon output to meet these goals. So I know that's not your department. I'm running a bill that will require you to count that. Hopefully it'll get passed and signed into law. The last question I have, which is something I hope you can answer, after reading this audit report, and there's many more things I could talk about that is just very frustrating. I think Senator Bradford did a very good job of articulating the frustration that is happening here in the legislature. But to meet those 2035 goals, how are you going to do it? We got to have something better than what this audit report says. If we're not going to have the ability to buy a zero-emission vehicle, because the manufacturers won't have a new one, I should say, and we're going to rely on, assuming that combustible engines will wear out at some point and we'll be forced to buy a zero-emission vehicle in California, how are you going to meet that goal?
Right. So first element of your question, recognizing the magnitude of the challenge, it's significant. There's just no doubt about that. You're not going to get a sugar coat. It's easy. But you will get the fact that the current purchases today of new vehicles that are zero, about 8%. and the number of models and vehicles and affordability and range and the fact that we're producing vehicles in the state and putting in charging stations, the ramp up, the increase is unprecedented. Both the production, manufacturing that we're seeing in the state and the number of vehicles. So regulation, incentive, partnering with other states, partnering with the manufacturers, support for continued infrastructure investments in California, both state and federal dollars, consumer work, consumer education. Every one of those elements are going to be necessary for this transition, and it's fundamental, not just to GHGs. And I really want to underscore this point because I think that tends to be the focus of these conversations, when the focus ought to be on reducing NOx emissions, toxic emissions, the pollutants basically contribute to ozone and PM 2.5 that significantly adverse public health. I'm not underplaying the significance of the challenge, but there's real results and progress, and California is unprecedented in how it's moved forward.